Okay, so a little warning, this video is gonna get into the dirty details. Okay, not dirty, but it's gonna be very TMI. So if you get grossed out, if you don't want to hear about any like fluids or any of that stuff, then this is not the video for you to watch. Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about my labor and delivery video. So let's get started. So I am currently 7 weeks postpartum, 8 weeks on Monday, and it is Friday right now, so I guess 7.5 weeks postpartum. I gave birth on June 25th to a baby boy named Judah, and he was 7 pounds 0.9 ounce, so he wasn't quite 1 ounce yet. He was healthy. He was born 3 weeks early from his due date, but he was still considered full term. He was born at 37 weeks and 1 day. He came out very quickly, but I'll get to that. So basically it all starts on June 25th at 4 a.m. Okay, so at 4 a.m. I had to go to the washroom, but then I felt like honestly, it does feel like you pee yourself. I constantly was reading, oh, like how does it feel when your water breaks, or how does your water break, and all of that. I felt like it was more of a feeling of not peeing yourself, but it felt like when you get your period and when you stand up and you feel that like flush when you get when your blood just pours out, and that's literally how it felt. It literally didn't feel like I was peeing because I couldn't stop it. So when you have your period and when you're wearing a pad, you would know. If you wear pads, I mean, I don't wear pads anymore, but I used to, or when I go to sleep I do. So when you wake up the first thing in the morning and you feel that like gush of blood, that's how it felt. But it wasn't just one gush, it was like an ongoing gush of water. I literally wet the bed at 4 a.m. and I was scared. I thought it was just a little bit of discharge because I had discharge when I was pregnant, but it was not just a bit of discharge. I felt a little bit and I literally froze. I didn't move because I was so scared. I thought I just had discharge and it was coming out, so I woke Jason up and I nudged him and I was like, oh my gosh, I think my water broke. And he's like fully dead asleep. I'm waking him up. I'm like, okay, I think my water broke. And he was like, okay, no, like you're not due yet. Your water is not broken. So I was freaking out. But then I was like, okay, no, I'm serious. My water broke because I felt it flowing more and more as I was moving. So I was like, okay, go to the washroom, go get me toilet paper so I can wipe this off. But as he was going to get the toilet paper, this water, I kid you not, kept flowing, and within seconds, my bed was wet. It was like I peed my bed. It was so embarrassing. It was like I peed my bed. And he got me this toilet paper, a chunk. I literally put it down there, and the toilet paper was wet. It was like I peed myself. So I quickly ran to the washroom, and I sat on the toilet, and it was like I was peeing, but I wasn't peeing. And then within 2 minutes, I think a minute or two, I started getting contractions. So I felt my contractions and I knew I was in labor. And I actually had a lot of false labors. I constantly felt these weird, I never knew what the labor pains felt like, and I had these sometimes sharp aching pains, and I think it was labor, but let me tell you, it was not. Labor pains are, not to scare you guys, are painful. They don't start off painful, but they get painful. But anyways, when people say they feel like period cramps, that is no lie, because it actually does feel like period cramps. And I was always scared that I wouldn't know what it felt like, because I didn't have period cramps when I get my period, and I had them when I was really young, but I no longer had them as I was growing up. So I forgot what they felt like, but let me tell you, once I had those contractions, I remembered 100% what period cramps felt like, and they were so uncomfortable. They were aching and pulsing, and it was just not fun. Anyways, time went by, 4:30. I woke everybody else up, and I woke everybody else up, and we called them. We said, oh my gosh, my water's broken, and so we quickly went to the hospital. So we got to the hospital at around 5 a.m. and it was really hard for them to decide whether to keep me or not, because my contractions were coming every half an hour. Some were 20 minutes, some were every 7 minutes. So they started off every 7 minutes, but then they went further and further away apart. And then, but I didn't know if I was strep B positive or negative, because I did take the test on the Friday, but I went into labor on the Monday. So they didn't know whether to start me on the antibiotics or not. So that was the biggest factor for them to whether to keep me or to not keep me. So they hooked me up on monitors, so they confirmed, yes, you're having contractions, yes, you're in labor, but it wasn't considered active labor, I believe. It was just early labor. So they wanted to send me home, but they didn't know my group B strep test results. So they told me to go walk around downstairs, and at that point my contractions were coming every single 5 to 7 minutes, and they were so painful. I didn't think that they would get worse, but let me tell you, they did. They started to progressively get worse and worse, and when they came, they would last about a minute or so, and that was so uncomfortable. But I made it, and let me tell you, I was so oblivious. I thought that they would not get worse because I wanted to do this natural. Let me tell you, I wanted to do my labor and delivery natural. I didn't want any epidural. I didn't want any laughing gas, none of that stuff. But as time went by, a few hours, I went back upstairs and they checked me. I was 2 centimeters dilated. I was also 2 centimeters dilated when I got to the hospital. And then, as time went by noon, my contractions were coming every 4 to 6 minutes or so. And then I thought I was dying. So I was convinced I was able to push, and I felt like I was 10 centimeters dilated. Let me tell you, I was not. I thought I was, but I was not, and it was the most devastating news to hear that. It wasn't the most devastating, but it was kind of sad to hear that I was only by noon. Let me tell you, I was in labor, and my water broke at 4 a.m. and I started getting contractions then. But let me tell you, my goodness, by noon I thought I was dying, and I was still 2 centimeters dilated. So they told me to go downstairs and to keep walking. But at that point they told me, you know what, we're not going to send you home because we don't know if you're group B, strep group B positive. So they said, we're going to keep you, we're going to keep an eye out on you, and we're gonna monitor you. So every hour I had to go downstairs at the hospital, walk in laps for 1 hour, and then go back upstairs. But every time they sent me back down. And then it wasn't till 4 p.m. So 12 hours later, they told me, okay, so go back downstairs. We will page you when we have a room ready for you in labor and delivery. So at that point, my contractions were super painful. I was convinced I was dying, but I was still telling myself, I can do this, I can tough through this, and I can do it naturally. And I was having so much troubles walking. My contractions were 2 to 3 minutes apart at this point. I was 2.5 centimeters dilated 12 hours later. So I didn't know when I was going to deliver at that point. We asked the doctors, and the doctor said that I probably wouldn't deliver till the next day. And yeah, so I felt like time was not going by. But by about 4:35, they admitted me to labor and delivery. They started me on Pitocin, I believe that's what it's called. And then they also started me on an antibiotic IV drip, so for the group B strep. So then I was on that, and then they put me on that, and I still felt pretty normal. I still felt like contractions were coming every couple minutes, and then an hour hit me, and I think the Pitocin, I believe that's what they gave me to speed things up a little, that hit. And at that point, I regretted my decision of doing it naturally. Let me tell you, I was crying by 6 p.m. So 2 hours later, being admitted into labor and delivery, I was crying. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My contractions were coming every minute and lasting about a minute, and I felt like I only had 30 seconds in between each contraction before they came back. So I got the so then I decided to get the fentanyl. And no, I got the morphine first. So they gave me the morphine. It did nothing. I felt like it did nothing. An hour later, I was still in pain. I was still crying, and my mom was in the room, and she told me, don't get the epidural, do anything but the epidural. But I felt like I was dying, so I thought I'd give another pain reliever a try, which was fentanyl. And I know you hear all these things on the news about fentanyl being bad, fentanyl killing people and all that, but they're very safe with this fentanyl. And so I got the fentanyl, and half an hour went by, and I was crying. I don't even think it was half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, and it did not kick in. Nothing kicked in. I felt I felt so much pain rushing through my body. I was so stressed out, and at that point they told me that I couldn't do it naturally, which was obvious, and they told me that I had to resort to the epidural because it was the best option, or else I would be putting myself in stress and putting baby in distress. Anyways, so I ended up saying yes to the epidural. My mom was in the room. She was not happy about my decision, but at that point I felt like I was dying, and I felt like I really needed it, so I took it. But it took about half an hour to 40 minutes before the anesthesiologist was able to come and put in the epidural, and at that point, within that 40 minutes, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was laying on my deathbed, and if I had to do it all over again, I would just go straight to the epidural. Yeah, so that's what happened. And then the anesthesiologist came and put it in, and it was very, very hard. And let me tell you, I felt like I was so drowsy from the morphine and the fentanyl. I was so drowsy, I couldn't keep my eyes open. I couldn't talk really. I just wanted to close my eyes the whole time. I felt like sleeping the whole time, and I couldn't sit up straight. And when you get an epidural, you have to be straight, and you cannot move at all because it is very dangerous. So I had to get Jason to hold me up, and it was very difficult, so let me tell you that. So I got the epidural, and it started to kick in about, I'd say, 20 minutes later to half an hour, and I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt so good. And at this point, it was already about 8-ish o'clock, and I felt so great. I ended up taking a nap, and at that point, I went from 2.5 centimeters from even 6 p.m. I was still 2.5 centimeters till about 10 o'clock. I went from 2.5 centimeters to 6.5 centimeters dilated. So within about 6 to 9, like 3 hours, I went from about 4 centimeters dilated. The mental math is not there. I'm trying. Anyways, so it moved very fast. So my contractions were coming really fast and for a really long period of time each time. And even though they were coming, I did not feel the contractions anymore after my epidural. And how I knew a contraction was coming was TMI again. It literally felt like a poop was at your bum. You would feel a lot of pressure in your bum. So at 10 o'clock, my nurse told me, I'll be right back. I am going on my break and I'm going to come back to deliver your baby. And I said, okay, in half an hour. And at that point, at 10 o'clock, I was 9.5 centimeters dilated. So I was almost there. So I felt great. So I took a nap and I ate a popsicle or two. I think I had a few popsicles while I was there. But half an hour went by and she never came back. And so the nurse that was watching me while she was on her break, she told me, okay, so before your nurse comes back, let's do a few trial pushes. So I told her, okay, so we started pushing. And my first push, I told her, I knew what to do because I felt the contraction. I felt the poop at my bum, but it wasn't actually poo. But anyways, I pushed and she said, okay, good job. So we can see the head a little, but it's not out, which was good. But at the same time, I felt like, wow, that was very quick. Second contraction, like the next contraction. She told me to push again, and I pushed, and she told me that we saw Judah's head. And I said, is this even normal? And she says, yeah, it's totally fine. You won't push him out quick anyways. Everybody takes about half an hour at the very least to 2 hours. It's usually the first baby is always about an hour to 2 hours. So I was telling myself, okay, this is going to be a long ride. And little did you know, third contraction, I pushed him and his head was starting to come out. And at that point, everybody was freaking out and I was scared. I was so scared. I didn't know what was happening and I was freaking out. I was like, and then I felt another contraction come. And this nurse was like, okay, let's go get the doctor, page the doctor, come on, get me dressed. Like, she didn't say get me dressed, but she's like, get me this, get me gowned and all that. So I was like, oh my gosh, is this even normal? Like, should he be coming out right now? And little did you know, Judah wanted to come out very quickly. And the rumor, I don't think it's a rumor, but anyways, when they say, when you get an epidural, you can't feel the bottom, so you tear a lot, and that is false. Let me tell you that. I'll get to that point, but so third contraction, I pushed, and fourth contraction, I pushed again, and his head was fully out. Let me tell you that. And the doctor was still not there. He has still not arrived until his head was fully out. Until the next contraction. He was getting dressed at my fourth contraction, and in between that, actually, I asked her, should I still keep pushing? Because I was scared. I was scared that the doctor wouldn't make it in time, so I actually didn't push between the third and the fourth contraction, which actually would be my fourth contraction. But anyways, so I guess my fifth contraction, his head came out because I was pushing. By the sixth contraction, the doctor was in, and he was gowned, and he was ready, and he pulled him out. And that was that, and Judah arrived, and let me tell you, you do feel the ring of fire, but I honestly felt like it wasn't that painful. It just was 30 seconds of burning, but it honestly didn't hurt. And it was so amazing when they took him out, and I heard him cry for the first time. He actually didn't cry right away, and I was really scared, but it turns out his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, and they didn't tell me, but I found out through the birth video, but he made it. He was super healthy. He was 7 pounds, and he arrived at around 11 p.m. and he was perfectly healthy. He was so happy. I was so happy. I don't know if he was happy to come out to the world. I don't know if he was ready. Well, clearly he was, because my water broke, but anyways, I didn't end up tearing. I pushed him out in 19 minutes, and that was my labor and delivery. And I don't regret a thing, except I wouldn't say I regret it, but if I had to redo it, I wouldn't have got the morphine and the fentanyl. So for you guys out there, I don't know what kind of pain relieving methods your hospital has, but check with them. I'm not too sure if it was the fentanyl or the morphine or just both of them, but they made me very drowsy. But the epidural is actually, you hear so many horror stories about it hurting your back in the future and all that. Mine didn't hurt. Your back gets very sore the next day, and that's about it. But yeah, it's not bad at all. I mean, I had a good time. Jason had a good time. My mom had a good time. Judah had a good time. We all had a good time, you know? So that's that. So that was my labor and delivery story, and I will be making a couple more videos soon, and stay tuned. And if you have any questions, comment them down below. If you want to see photos of Judah, you guys can always follow me on Instagram. I'll link them down below. And I think that's about it. And thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you guys in my next video.